Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. We're reading the Torah portion for this coming Shabbat. We're going to be reading Numbers 32 to 32:42. This is the 42nd teaching in this year's Shabbat cycle. And we're going to get started, and we're going to read a lot about vows in this first part of this week's Torah portion. And we're going to continue, and we're getting closer and closer to the end of the book of Numbers, which would be the end of the public ministry of Moses. And then we're going to start recapping everything and starting to see some things in Deuteronomy about what the children were supposed to do and how they will be blessed or cursed for it. And the Torah is the foundation of all Scripture, and we need to get a good understanding of the Torah if we want to understand the message that Messiah was giving, because he taught right from the Torah. So we're up to chapter 30, verse 2. Get your Bibles out for the 42nd reading in this year's cycle. And we're going to start off here. It says, let's go back and review verse 1 last week, what we saw ended. It said, "And Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the sons of Israel, saying, This is the thing which Yahweh has commanded." And then it starts in this week's Torah, which starts off and says, "When a man vows a vow to Yahweh, or has sworn an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do all the things that is gone out of his mouth." So when somebody makes a vow, or even more specific, a covenant, and it says in Jeremiah, "Cursed be the man that keeps not the words of this covenant." You're making a covenant to our Creator, saying you will do something, and you will not break that. When you make a vow, your vow is bond. It's forever. And we look at the example of what happened when Joshua was deceived by the tribes that were living next to him that he was going to destroy, but they made their clothes look all raggedy and said they came from really far away. So he said he won't destroy them. But then later when he found out that they in fact did deceive him, he already said his word. He made a vow, so he couldn't do it. And then we go on and we look how Saul broke that covenant that Joshua made, and the problems that happened because of that. So when you make a vow, you got to keep a vow. A man makes a vow, and we look at the hierarchy, so to say, or the roles of men and women. And we see the man makes a vow to our wonderful Creator. It goes on and talks about in verse 3 here, "And when a woman vows a vow to Yahweh, and has bond a bond in the house of her father in her youth, and her father has heard her vow, and her bond which she has bound her soul, and her father has remained silent as to her, then all her vows shall stand, and everybody with which she has bound her soul shall stand." So if a woman makes this vow and the father hears it but doesn't say anything, then the woman's vow is valid and will stand. Verse 5 says, "But if a father has prohibited her in the day he heard none of her vows, and her bond which she has bound her soul shall stand, and Yahweh will forgive her because her father prohibited her." So she can be released from her bond. She can be released from a vow as well if the father does speak up and doesn't remain silent. Verse 6, "And if she belongs to her husband, and her vows are on her, or a rash utterance on her lips, which she has bound her soul, and her husband has heard in the day and has remained silent to her, then her vow shall stand, and her bond which she has bound her soul shall stand. And if that day her husband hears or prohibits her from speaking, and the rash utterance of her lips with which she has bound her soul, and Yahweh will forgive her." So again, this the husband replacing the father as the role of the spiritual head of the household. And if they say nothing, if they hear the woman make a vow, whether it's the daughter or the wife, and they say nothing, her vow will stand. But if they prohibit her from making that vow, then she will be forgiven if she breaks the vow she made. Verse 9, "And as to a vow of a widow or her that is divorced, all that she has bound on her soul shall be established on her." So if she doesn't have a husband, or if she's divorced, the vow will be on her own, and there's nobody that can prohibit it or speak for her. "And if she has vowed in the house of her husband, or bound a bond on her soul with an oath, and her husband has heard and remained silent to her, he has denied her, then her vow shall be established. If he has not denied her, then her vow shall be established." So it really gets into and talks about these vows, and it finishes in chapter 30. It continues and talks about the vows. Now remember, this is the end of Moses' ministry. Joshua is going to take over and lead the children into the promised land. And just like we saw in the last Torah portion where the daughters, they didn't have a brother to get the inheritance of the land, so the daughters spoke up and said, give it to us. Moses had to let the people know exactly in situations how to handle them, because he wasn't going to be around much longer. So now he's covering the vows, and he's talking about vows and the responsibility that goes with it. So it ends in chapter 30 with verse 16. It says, these are the statutes which Yahweh has commanded Moses between a man and his wife, between a father and his daughter, in her youth and in the house of her father. So this is what it was. And there's a note here in this scripture that says, in Yahweh's judicial order, women should always have a covering to protect them. This ancient aspect of society that had much love and wisdom is almost lost in Western society today, which is exactly right. This is what's happening today, and it wasn't that way here. You had the covering of the vow by the husband or the father. And again, it gets into the roles and it talks about the roles. And Moses is just letting people know, well, people will make vows, and you're tied to that vow, what you've said, that covenant you've made. However, if it's a woman or a girl making it, they can be released from that if the father does speak up or the husband speaks up. So vows is all in chapter 30, and we're going to go to chapter 31 here. And don't think chapter 30 is not important, because it goes and talks about in scripture a lot about being careful what you speak and what you say and how you say it, because as it says in Jeremiah again, those that break the covenant shall be cursed. And covenant and vow, you're making a promise. Chapter 31 here says, and Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, and remember folks, it's not Moses making these things up. He is the messenger. I've said it over and over again, and it could seem like it is Moses. There are some people that even say the Mosaic law. Well, first of all, it's a statute or a guideline or instruction, and it didn't come from Moses. It came from our wonderful Creator, but Moses is just being the messenger. So it says, Creator Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, execute the vengeance of the sons of Israel against the Midianites, after you shall be gathered to your people. So now we go into chapter 31, and it switches gears completely. So we got the vows out of the way here, and now we talk a little bit about revenge and talks about what happened with the Midianites. And in chapter 31 it says, Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, execute the vengeance of the sons of Israel against the Midianites. Afterward you should be gathered to your people. So he's telling Moses, this is the last public thing that you're going to tell the people to do. And after this, that's it, Moses. You'll be gathered to your people and your life will end. And he told him to execute the vengeance on the sons of Israel against the Midianites. Because you remember the Midianite women that seduced the children of Israel? It says in verse 3, and Moses spoke to the people, saying, some men of you be armed for the army, and they shall be against Midian, to give the vengeance of Yahweh on Midian. You shall send to the army 1,000 for a tribe, as to all the tribes of Israel. And 1,000 for a tribe were given out of the thousands of Israel, 12,000 armed ones of the army. So you had 1,000 from each tribe, and they were armed. And Moses sent them to the army, 1,000 for a tribe, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, to the army. Also he sent the holy vessels and the trumpets to sound in his hand. And they warned against Midian, as Yahweh had commanded Moses, and killed every male. So pay attention, folks, because this is what's about to happen. Remember, Yahweh told Moses to have the children strike vengeance against Midian, which he did. They killed all the males, and verse 8 says, and they killed the kings of Midian besides the rest of their slain. Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword. So Balaam, this was his end, and Balaam, we saw in the last Torah portion how he created this issue for the children of Israel to be seduced by these women. He was killed here by the Israelites. Balaam and the son of Beor with the sword, so he was killed. Verse 9, and the sons of Israel took the women of Midian captive, and their infants, and all their livestock, all their possessions, and they plundered all their wealth. Now, did you hear what just happened? They took all of the children and the women as captive. These very same women that created this plague not too long ago that was mingling with them. It says here in verse 10, and they burned all their cities with fire, their homes and their towers. And they took all the spoil, all the prey among men and among animal. And they brought it to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the congregation of the sons of Israel, the captives and the prey and the spoil in the camp, to the plains of Moab, which by Jordan near Jericho. And Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the rules of the congregation went outside to meet them outside the camp. So now Moses coming outside to see what they brought back. And here, remember, this is Moses, probably the wisest person up to this time, and the messenger of our Creator. Here's what he says in verse 14. And Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds, who came from the service of war. Now, before we read on, can you guess why Moses was angry? Well, think about it for a second. And pause the film here and just think about why he was angry. I knew right away why he was angry, and he had every right to be. So here's your answer, verse 15. And Moses said to them, have you saved all the women alive? Question mark. More like he asked them. And 16, behold, these through the counsel of Balaam. And remember, it didn't reveal that Balaam gave the counsel, but here it's saying it was the counsel of Balaam to the sons of Israel, a deliverance of treachery against Yahweh in the matter of Peor. And the plague was in the company of Yahweh. And this was when the women fornicated and seduced the men of Israel that we just saw recently with Balaam advising Balak to let that happen. Now kill every male among the infants, so kill all the young children that are male. Ye, you shall kill every woman having known a man by lying with a male. So every woman that wasn't a virgin that they took prisoner was to be killed. And you shall keep alive for yourselves all the female children who have not known a man by lying with a male. So only the virgin women and children were to remain, and that was that. And encamped outside the camp 7 days, whoever has killed any person, and whoever touched or pierced one, purify yourself on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, you and your captives. And as to every garment and all that is made of skin, and all work of goat's hair, and all things made of wood, you shall purify them. And Eleazar the priest said to the men of war who went to battle, this is the statute of the law of which Yahweh has commanded Moses. So now you have Eleazar starting to take the role of messenger, or at least hearing as well, not just Moses. The transition of Moses getting ready to be sent to his people or to die is taking place here. Verse 22, only the gold, the silver, and the copper, and the iron, and the tin, and the lead, everything that passes through the fire, you shall make it go through the fire, and it shall be clean. Only it shall be purified with the water for impurity, and everything that cannot go through the fire, you shall make go through the water. And you shall wash your clothes on the 7th day, and you shall be clean, and afterward you shall come into the camp. Now, this here specific instructions for Moses during this situation, or for the children of Israel during this situation. We cannot do the things here. The things here today that we're doing is completely different that they had going on there. And even war and battle is handled differently. So, we have to keep that in mind, that the times that they had going on there, and the culture and the way it was versus it is today. Verse 25, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, lift the heads of the prey of the captives among men and among beasts, you and Eleazar the priest, and the heads of the fathers of the congregation. And you shall divide the prey between those skilled in war that went to battle and all the congregation. So the thousands of people, the 12,000 that went to battle, they were going to get their portion, but the congregation wasn't to be left out. The assembly was still the assembly. 28, and you shall levy a tribute to Yahweh from the men of war who went out to battle, one body out of 500 of men, and of the herd of the donkeys and of the flock. You shall take from their half, and you shall give to Eleazar the priest to heave offering of Yahweh. Now remember, the spoil that they took, and I believe we're going to be covering it soon, there was a lot. I mean, you got to think about the Midianites that Israel overcame with just 12,000 men. I mean, there was a lot of people that they took down here when they did this. And we could just tell by the spoilage, by the amount of cattle left over, how big it all was. Verse 29, you shall take from their half, and you shall give to Eleazar the priest as the heave offering of Yahweh. Verse 30, and from the sons of Israel's half, you shall take one portion out of 50 of men, and the herd, and of the donkeys, and of the flock, and of the livestock, and you shall give them to the Levites, keeping the charge of the tabernacle of Yahweh. And Moses and Eleazar the priest did as Yahweh had commanded Moses. So you look at the righteousness that was in place there with Eleazar and Moses. They did what Yahweh had commanded. Verse 32, and to pray the rest of the spoil which the people of the army plundered was 675,000 sheep. Now, before we read the rest of it, 675,000. So you can imagine how big this land was that the children came in and overtook. 33, and 72,000 ox, 61,000 donkeys, and of human beings, of the women who had not been known by a man lying with a male, the persons were 32,000. Again, folks, we look at what happened, and we look at how big it was, and just 12,000 men overtook all of this. And you have just 32,000 virgin women and children. When you look at all the men and women that were most likely slaughtered, I mean, to have 32,000 children, you're definitely going to have more than 12,000 soldiers here, which all Israel had, and they overtook them. And up to this day, Israel has been the underdog, so to say, but always comes out on top, because the land of Israel is blessed by Yah. And it says here in 36, and the portion of those who went out to war, the number of the flock was 337,500. And the tribute to Yahweh of the sheep was 675. And the oxen 36,000. And it goes on to give the donkey, and it goes into the tribute and the exact numbers and so on. And who gets what part of what lot or what half they get, and the breakdown. And verse 49, which we'll go down to, says, and they said to Moses, your servants have lifted up the heads of the men of war who are with us, and not one man is missing. So not only did Yahweh provide victory over the Midianites, but not one of the Israeli soldiers went missing or were lost during this battle. And that just speaks to the amazingness of Yahweh that so many people overlook. Not one was missing, and there were thousands and hundreds of thousands maybe of the Midianites there. And that just blows my mind. And then we're going to, you finish up chapter 31, and we're going to go to chapter 32 now, verse 1, and it says here, and the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad had many livestock, a very great multitude, and they saw the land of Jazer, the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was the place for the livestock. So what we had here was the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad approaching Moses saying, can we stay here and not go to the other side of the Jordan? And first, Moses got very angry, saying, certainly not, you need to come with us, your brothers, and fight. And they said, well, let our family stay back and let us have this good cattle land for our cattle, and we will go in and fight with you. We won't come back here until Israel accomplished their goals. And Moses agreed to that. So you had these two tribes, and it was actually 2.5 tribes that stayed on that side of the Jordan, and everyone else crossed over into the promised land. And they weren't not going into the promised land because they were scared at this point. They weren't going in because they saw how the ground was great for their cattle, and they had a lot of cattle. These tribes were apparently had more cattle than and all the rest of the tribes, and they saw how great this land was. So they approached Moses and asked Moses this, and Moses said, fine, if you will come over with us and fight and not come back until we've accomplished our goal, that's fine. But he warned them, he said, but if you even think about going back before the time is, curses will be put amongst you. We'll recap that in verse 29. Even Moses said to them, if the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben pass over the Jordan with you, each armed for battle before Yahweh, and the land shall be subdued before you, Then you shall give to them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they will not go over armed with you, they shall have possessions among you in the land of Canaan. So after Moses says this, they agree. We go down to verse 31. The sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben replied, saying, Yahweh has said to your servants, so we will do. We ourselves will pass over armed before Yahweh into the land of Canaan, so that the land of our inheritance on that side of the Jordan may be ours. Now they're listening to Moses. Now they understand, but too little, too late. None of these people are going to really be going into the promised land, or all the people that were part of the rebellion against Yahweh in the desert to begin with. But now they're starting to listen to Moses, and Moses told them what they wanted to hear, so they were pleased about listening to this. And it goes on to recap the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben. That's what it finishes up here in this chapter, and it talks about them building city for their cattle on that side of the Jordan. And that is the end of this week's Torah portion and the end of this chapter. Now, during leap years, this Torah portion is read by itself. But if it's a non-leap year, you take this Torah portion and read it with Torah portion number 43, which is the last Torah portion of the book of Numbers. So if it's not a leap year, you would read them by themselves, 42 and then 43, another Shabbat. But if it is a leap year, you get to read them together. And that was this week's Torah portion, everybody. If you have any comments or questions, post them below the video. Thanks for checking us out. Until then, have a great day and a great Shabbat, and shalom, shalom, shalom.
Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways, Torah Life Ministries, come out of the world,